Hello students and welcome to this whiteboard video lesson. I'm going to be teaching about the concept of break-even analysis and using that concept to also introduce the concept of marginal analysis. And you're going to see break-even analysis used a lot in business, but economists like to model our decisions as being made on the margin. And so we also want to focus on marginal analysis for this course as well. And we're also going to need the marginal analysis to build the respective demand and supply curves that we use to model prices and quantities in markets. Okay. All right, so let's start over here on this side with break-even analysis. And what I want to do is I want to put in two equations to represent two lines. The first line is going to be total revenue. And that's going to be modeled by the equation y equals 35x. Okay. You might have noticed from this graph that x is the variable represents quantity. And the question is, well, what does y represent? Well, y is going to represent a couple of things. Well, one of those things is going to be total revenue. So I'm going to put this to let you know that we're mapping total revenue here. And revenue is expressed in dollar terms. So basically everything in dollar terms for both graphs actually is going to be on the y-axis, and everything in quantity terms is going to be on the x-axis. Okay. All right, now this equation right here is linear because it's going to be modeled by a straight line. Okay. We'll draw it in a second first, but we're going to draw total cost first. Okay. All right. Total cost is represented by a nonlinear equation. This actually, I took the first figure and combined some aspects of the second figure to make this a nonlinear cost function. And so what this means is that we're going to have two different line segments here. And so it's going to be equal to 225 plus 20x. Okay. And 225 plus 40x. Okay. Now, these are two lines that are being combined, okay? And since they have two different slopes, they're nonlinear. And what we're going to do is I'm going to set a kink point here. Okay, so the kink point is going to be at 20 units. Okay, so it's going to be 225 plus 20x if x is less than or equal to 20, and it's going to be equal to 225 plus 40x if x is greater than 20. Okay. All right. So now that we have our cost function, we can go ahead and map this out here. Okay, so the first thing I want to map out is this 225 here. And this is what we would call our FC, or our fixed cost. Okay. And so when the quantity is 0, we start off with our original cost of just setting up, say, the factory that's producing the product. Okay. All right, so at that 225, we have our fixed cost, and then it's going up 20x, okay? And so this 20, or this 40 here, is what we would call our per unit cost. And then when you do the combined part, this times the number of units, that is your VC, your variable cost. Okay? So if you're looking at just the coefficient, you're looking at the per unit cost, but if you're looking at the coefficient times the number of units, that's going to give you your variable cost, okay? So it's your cost that varies with output. Fixed costs are fixed, they don't vary with output. All right, so what I want to show here is that at all the way up to 20, okay, the quantity is going to be 20 units times $20, which is the per unit cost. And so that would be $400, okay, but we're going to have to add that to the cost here. So what I'm going to do here is kind of a little trick here. So I'm going to add this segment 1, 2, okay. And that's going to give me my kink point here at 20 units and roughly here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to draw an x-intercept from here to here. I'm going to draw my y-intercept, is what I would say. Connect my y-intercept to this kink point, okay? So along this period here, our costs per unit are $20 per unit cost, okay? Okay, so this happens at 20. Okay, the next, what we're going to do here is we're going to have the cost go up to $40 per unit. And so if we run this times 10 units, from 20 to 30, that's $400. So we're going to add another $400 when we get to 30 here. Okay, so that's that one. Okay, so boom, boom, okay. And then here. Okay. So roughly about right here is where we're going to get this nice little kink here. Okay, so here it is $40 per unit. All right, now let's drop all the way down to 30 here. Okay, and so now we can start to kind of add our tick marks in here just to make it a little bit easier to see. So 20, 400, 600, 800, and let's stop at 1,000. So our y-axis is also going to show our total revenue and our total cost here, okay? All right, so now we have our total cost line here, okay? Now we can break this down into its components here. So if we take the dotted line at 225 and we kind of rising up a little bit here, we go right across here, then this vertical distance represents the fixed cost at 30 units. And this vertical distance represents the variable cost at 30 units. Okay, so you can see the variable cost kind of rises here. Okay. All right, so now let's throw in total revenue. Okay, so total revenue is y times 35x. Okay. And so I know from the problem here that the break-even point is going to be at 15 units. And so to just make this easier to draw and accurate, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that 15 is the break-even point. Okay. And if we start at 0, because when x is 0, y is 0. Okay, and we connect the dot between the break-even point and the origin. And let's kind of make sure we get this nice and straight because we have a constant slope here. This is linear. Okay. And so this is our total revenue. Okay. All right, so when total revenue is less than total cost, our profit, okay, which is equal to total revenue minus total cost, is going to be negative, and we're going to call that a loss. So this height right here represents a loss. And as we produce more, we shrink that loss, we break even, and then we start to produce a profit. Okay. So that is your profit. Okay. All right, so that's break-even analysis there. And what it tells you is that based on your profit, based on your revenue function and your cost function, at what point will you break even, in which your profit is zero, and it separates, at least tells you how much at least you need to make to break even. Now, firms aren't interested in just breaking even, they're interested in making profits. The question is, well, which one of these points here is going to be the profit maximizing quantity, profit maximizing output? To do this, you actually need to use what we call marginal analysis. Now you can try to eyeball it and say that the greatest vertical distance between total revenue and total cost is the profit maximizing quantity here. But it's not always easy to see, especially in this case where maybe I didn't draw a perfectly straight line here. So what we could do is we could do marginal analysis, okay? And we can see here that for the cost here, our first unit is going to cost us $20 because we have a $20 per unit cost all the way up to 20 units, and then we have $40 per unit cost, okay? So you'll notice here I actually label the units the 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th units, okay? And that's because when you're looking at marginal analysis, you're looking at each consecutive unit and you're saying, well, how much am I adding to my cost? How much am I adding to my revenue? Okay, so focusing on cost. Now, just before we even produce our first unit, our fixed cost is already $225. You're not going to see that on this graph here. You're only going to see things that are going to affect the variable cost. Okay, so our first unit will cost us $20 per unit, and so we're just going to go ahead and map out, say, 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay. Okay, so all the units all the way up to 20, okay, so this is our kink, is going to be $20 per unit. So each time we produce a unit, we're adding $20 to our cost. Okay. Then it jumps up to 40. So all of the other units after that are going to be 40, okay? So this becomes our marginal cost curve, and this is also an individual firm's supply curve. And another interesting thing here, that if we were to produce 25 units, all the area underneath this line and in between the first unit and that sort is your variable cost. All of this kind of area here. Okay. All right. Now, what about revenue? Okay. Well, total revenue is the per unit price times the quantity. So every time you sell a unit, you're adding $35 to your revenue. So the lot line is easy to draw. And so at $35, we're going to have a horizontal line and saying that our marginal revenue is going to be equal to our price at $35. Okay. So what the firm is doing here to decide how much they should produce, they want to produce as long as they're adding more to their revenue than they're adding to their cost. So as long as marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, I'm going to be increasing profit. Okay, and then anything after that, I'm going to be decreasing profit. Okay. So we can see from here, it's at this intersection at 20, okay, the kink is also where we are profit max. And if you want to think about, well, what is our total revenue? Okay, our total revenue is our price, 35, times our quantity, 20. And so the area of this rectangle right here is actually our total revenue. So we're subtracting from that total revenue our variable costs, which would be 20 times 20, okay, and that area right there. And so all this rectangle right here is increasing our profit. Now I don't say it's profit because remember we still have a fixed cost of $225 to pay for. So somewhere around here, say at 15, at this break-even point, all units after that are making our profits greater than zero. And this helps pay for our fixed cost. And so you could see here that 225 would be the area of this section right here of the fixed cost. So once we pay off our fixed costs with our leftover amount there, then this is profit. Okay. All right, so we use marginal analysis to build the supply curve, and it comes up with this basic rule of thumb that, you know, if marginal revenue is greater than or equal to marginal cost, keep producing. So don't stop where you break even, keep going to here, to 20, where you would have profit max. All right, thank you all. See you on the next video tutorial.